Rain came down in sheets, slashing through the wind and drenching the small countryside town of Black Hollow. Mia sat behind the wheel of her sputtering car, squinting through the windshield. The wipers struggled to keep up with the relentless downpour, their rhythmic squeaking blending with the sound of rain hammering the roof. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, glancing at the GPS on her phone. "Turn left in 200 feet, it instructed, though she could barely see the turn. When she finally spotted it, a narrow dirt road flanked by skeletal trees, her stomach churned. The way ahead looked more like the entrance to a graveyard than a driveway. "This has to be it," she muttered, her voice uneasy. She turned the car and crept forward, the tyres sliding slightly in the mud. The road stretched endlessly, its path illuminated only by the faint glow of her headlights. Gnarled branches clawed at the sky, and the rain seemed to grow heavier the farther she went. Finally, the trees gave way to a clearing, and there it stood, the house. It was massive and decrepit, its wood warped from years of neglect. The roof sagged in places, and dark water stains streaked its walls. The windows were shuttered, though some hung askew, revealing glimpses of the black void within. Maya parked and stepped out, pulling her coat tight against the rain. She shivered as the cold sank into her bones. Her uncle's letter had said little, only that he had passed away and left her the house. The lawyer handling the estate had called it the Reinhardt Manor. To Maya, it was less a manor and more a mausoleum. She reached the front door, her shoes squelching in the mud, and inserted the tarnished key she'd been sent. The lock resisted, groaning like a dying animal, but eventually turned. The door creaked open, and a wave of cold, damp air greeted her. The foyer was vast, but dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. Dust motes floated in the air, disturbed by her arrival. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet as she stepped inside, her suitcase dragging behind her. "Hello," she called, though she knew no one would answer. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of rain pounding on the roof. She flipped a light switch on the wall, and a few dim bulbs sputtered to life. The interior was as bleak as the exterior, faded wallpaper, cracked ceilings, and furniture shrouded in white sheets. The air smelled of mildew and something else, faint but unpleasant, like rotting wood. As Mia explored the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. Shadows danced in her periphery, and the creaks of the floorboards seemed to echo longer than they should. In the living room, she found a stack of old photographs on the mantel. They were black and white, depicting grim-faced people who she assumed were her relatives. In one picture, a group stood in front of the house, their expressions devoid of warmth. A figure in the background caught her eye. Unlike the others, it was blurry, almost indistinct, and seemed to hover near the edge of the photograph. She frowned, leaning closer, but a sudden knock at the door made her jump. Her heart pounded as she turned toward the entrance. Who would be out here in this weather? She hesitated before opening the door. A man stood on the porch, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His coat dripped water onto the wooden planks, and his posture was rigid. "Can I help you?" Mia asked, keeping the door only slightly ajar. The man tilted his head. "You're the new owner?" His voice was deep and rough, like gravel scraping against metal. Yes, Mia Reinhardt. You shouldn't have come," he said flatly. Mia's blood ran cold. "Excuse me?" The man took a step closer, his boots thudding heavily against the porch. "This house doesn't belong to you. It belongs to them." Before she could respond, he turned and disappeared into the rain. Mia slammed the door and locked it, her hands trembling. She leaned against the door, her breath shallow. "Them?" The word echoed in her mind as she moved through the house, trying to shake the unease that had settled over her. She checked each room, flipping on lights where she could, but the sense of being watched only grew stronger. By the time she reached the second floor, she was exhausted. The master bedroom was relatively clean, and she decided it would do for the night. She locked the door and crawled into the old four-poster bed, pulling a quilt over her. The rain continued its relentless assault, and the wind howled through the cracks in the walls. Just as Mia was drifting off, a sound jolted her awake, a faint, rhythmic tapping. She froze, her eyes darting to the window. The curtains fluttered slightly in the draft, but the glass was intact. Tap! Tap! It was coming from the hallway. Maya's pulse quickened. She sat up, straining to hear over the pounding rain. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Suddenly, she grabbed the heavy candlestick from the bedside table and crept toward the door. She unlocked it as quietly as possible and peered into the dark hallway. Empty. The tapping stopped. Relief washed over her, but just as she turned back to the room, something cold brushed against her ankle. She screamed, stumbling backward. The candlestick clattered to the floor as she scrambled to her feet. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for the source of the touch. Nothing. But the air had changed. It felt heavier, charged with an unseen presence. A soft whisper drifted through the hallway, so faint she almost thought she'd imagined it. Leave. Mia slammed the door shut and pushed the dresser against it, her heart racing. She huddled in the corner of the room, clutching the candlestick